Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today, we're going to be talking about the newest album from Fen called The Deadlight. I'll admit there's still a part of me that's still kind of surprised to look back on 2017 and how much I really liked the fifth album, Winter, from English black metal band Fen. Now, on the surface, makes sense. Atmospheric black metal with a bit of a progressive stripe, but that's not too far afield for me. But they were also willing to get a little bit more grisly and swampy, push beyond flirtations with post-rock into something that's darker and murkier while not sliding outright into doom or death metal. And yet the textural choices they picked were so rich, the melodies were so striking, and so much of the lyrical poetry was so potent that I found myself really appreciating Winter, so much so that it made my list of the best albums of that year. Spoiler alert, it still belongs there. But now we're late to 2019, and not only have I had a chance to hear a little bit more black metal over the course of the year, still haven't reviewed as much as I would prefer to, but again, I got a plan for that in 2020, stay tuned. But I also took the opportunity to go back over their output this entire decade to see if any of it might be worthy, maybe including on a larger decade list that might be coming next year, especially given the critical acclaim surrounding their 2014 album, Carrion Skies. And well, putting aside how the clean singing has thankfully improved from their rather sloppily produced 2009 debut, I remember liking Epoch for some striking compositions and good ideas, but thinking the atmosphere, the production, and the writing had yet to really back up the refinement and groove that I found so engrossing later on. And while Carrion Skies did get closer, it is a pretty great album to boot. It never quite got there as dynamically as I was hoping. But hey, that just left me with the hope that The Deadlight would be as visceral and potent as its predecessor, so what did Fen deliver with this? Well, okay, this is a bit of a tougher album to discuss than I expected, because if you're coming for this project expecting more of Winter or along that line, this is not really that. Taking a slightly cleaner, more effervescent and progressive tone, a little more post-rock than the guttural wallow that was the last album. And on the one hand, that's pretty great. Fen's got a measured taste for melodic complexity, they integrate other genre flourish as well, and this is certainly a much easier album to digest than Winter was, if only on length and song structure alone. That being said, it is an album that feels a little bit closer to Carrion Skies, but with that increased diversity and higher production value. So while I don't quite think it hits as strongly as Winter did, at least for me, it still is pretty great and might even satisfy Fen's diehard fans more, so take of that what you will. But I want to start off with the element that always goes underserved when you're talking about black metal, lyrics, and themes. Now, I've gone on record saying that Fen are phenomenal descriptive writers coming off of Winter, and that's really just as true here, especially given the scale they're working with has now gone cosmic. Just like Tomb Mold, they're going into space, but their approach is very different. Indeed, I'd probably place Fen closer in line with an act like Al Rakas, or maybe that 2016 In the Woods album, Pure, where there is a surprising amount of sonic and thematic parallels. Unsurprisingly, the project is punishingly bleak, facing down not just the inevitability of death, but the ending of all life throughout the universe through the passage of time, with devastating impact across the cosmos painted in some pretty visceral language. But what I find so fascinating is how Fen don't just wallow in despair, but show a persistent curiosity, both outwards towards the unknowable origin of such life on Nebula, where, like on Winter, the attempt to discover such secret truths result in shaking them to the very core, but also going inwards on a song like Labyrinthine Echoes, where questions are raised how much we really know, and how much of our lives and senses are potentially just lies that we tell ourselves in order to stay sane. How very postmodern of them to engage in that sort of deconstruction, but then Fen goes further for the final two tracks, to highlight the blood-sucking, half-formed rituals of faith to which people will willingly subjugate themselves because they just can't face the truth of inevitable non-existence. And while that's not really framed as being good for them, you can tell that Fen kind of at least gets it, they understand, especially when they've tried to stare into the void themselves and find greater truth and yet have not found answers, even if there is any, where even the suicidal hope to embrace the darkness, it isn't enough, because that darkness doesn't care. And I ultimately really like how The Deadlight approaches the relative lack of answers they receive, where at least some modicum of inner peace has been found in the search, if nothing else. So yeah, okay, the writing's as great as ever, and seriously, there's some beautifully descriptive but not overly verbose poetry that Fen brings to the table here. How about the sound? Well, again, I'll be blunt. If you're looking for the stylistic variation and sheer guttural weight that came off of Winter, again, this is not that. You're not going to get a change-up as gristly and potent as midway through Pathway from the last album. And I'd also argue there isn't quite the same diversity when it comes to the more ethereal moments, at least on a textural level, and we'll come back to this. Oh, the melodies themselves are as vibrant and remarkably catchy as ever, and the shorter song structures, they only give these moments a lot more of a chance to shine, and Fenn can stick a phenomenal slow build crescendo, like how the gungy bass and the liquid guitars fully explode across Witness, or how on part 2 of the title track, even as just an instrumental coda, I'd argue it handles its time and its build-up over the groove even better than part 1. And a big part of this is how Fenn is very willing to let their bass guitar stand alone, and have some prominent interweaving passages with the more progressive lead guitar work, which thanks to the pseudo-thrash moments on cuts like Labyrinthine Echoes, it's a lot more developed than ever before. And there are some striking, quieter moments where the darker tones of the bass picks up some great simmer, like on Nebula and Breath of Void, the latter which is probably some of the most heavy and frenetic with the blast beats you're going to hear on this album. Although some of the flatter grind on Exsanguination that gets kind of crazy dynamic later on, and the multiple groove change-ups on Rendered Onyx, they're pretty great too. Hell, on a compositional level, I will say that Fenn is only getting more intricate and progressive, taking a lot of their looping passages and interweaving them a lot tighter with some great grooves, and a lot of the drum work, it's a little bit more progressive, and that's solid, but these are compositional observations. Where I think Fenn stumbles a little bit in comparison with Winter, it's textural in terms of their tonal diversity. Yes, songs like Labyrinthine Echoes, they get more spacious, and there's some pretty great liquid switch-ups that are pretty close to post-rock, but in a really good way. But if you can't latch onto the lead melody, which can occasionally not really rise above the tremolo riffs as strongly as I would like, and you don't have that more distinctive texture from song to song, the album can start to run together a little bit. There's certainly an emotional arc and vibe to the album that you get from the themes, and it really does get strikingly beautiful in the final song with the brighter chord progressions and the more defined melodies, especially during the outro. It's really striking. But you know what? If you're taking a project like this to space, I do feel like there was a bit of a missed opportunity to explore more cold alien tones and weirdness that doesn't really translate. We get a little bit of keyboards, but maybe a little more there would have actually fully fleshed out the atmosphere. And while I'm there, while I don't mind the cleaner vocals as they've improved considerably over the years, if there was an album to get more layers of symphonic bombast behind them, it was this one, especially given the apocalyptic cosmic scale of it all. Some critics have called this a choice to embrace more progressive metal elements. Again, the modern In the Woods comparison does not feel out of place, but I'd also argue that's really the excuse to expand the sonic palette, not just add complexity that's in the compositions. Again, the prog metal fans I think will really get on board, but some of the black metal could have afforded to get a little more textured. But again, it's hard to criticize an album like The Deadlight because it does so much right, and I can see a lot of fans seeing a return to form similar to Carrion Skies. It's likely more on me than other people. That being said, as much as I will praise this as excellently written, beautifully played, and genuinely impressive in spots, I'm not going to say it truly grabbed or gripped me or stirred me in the same way that Winter did. It is still pretty great. It's netting an 8 out of 10 for me, and absolutely a recommendation if you're a fan of the more progressive side of atmospheric black metal that absolutely can get pretty visceral and huge, that embraces depressive melancholy without drowning or suffocating in it. But again, I'm not quite as gripped as I was in 2017, but hell, for a slice of black metal to end out this year, it's still pretty excellent. Make the time, check it out. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. I'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Yeah, I know I've not covered enough black metal this year. Don't worry, we're going to have a way to deal with that before the end of the year. Stay tuned for that. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. If you guys are looking to buy or stream the album, links down there below. And I got the poll up there. I am curious where the fans fall on this. Fenn's always a bit of a weird album to gauge, like as a band. And I'm also, again, Winter was a bit of a change in sound, so this might be going back to a more conventional sound for them, so I'm curious how the fans respond. Beyond that, hey, if you're looking for other album reviews or the newest episode of Billboard Breakdown, links in the card, right over there. But until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.